All right, everybody. Celtics continue their winning ways here in the preseason, back to back over the weekend against the Sixers and Raptors. We have our thoughts on that, as well as Jason Tatum and the starting five is live on Netflix. So we've got a lot to dig into on that. So we'll give you our thoughts, our starting five review, all that and more coming up next. Is Agreeing with Envy. Let's lock in. What up? What up? What up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today, as he does each and every time, my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Menakis. How you doing on this Monday morning, my friend?
Good. I had my cup of coffee, took care of the baby boy. We kept him home from daycare today, as it is Indigenous Peoples Day. So Danielle is home from work. We're here. We're chilling. I actually have to work after this pod, but excited to talk about starting five.
Just in case your employer's listening, Greg, super early Monday morning.
Oh yeah, this
is
is
when
6
this
a.m.
is
baby.
happening. Yeah, just woke up, wiping the coal out our eyes right now. Just so everyone's clear. But no, that's exciting, man. Yeah, I got the day off today, so got a little iced coffee going today. A little change it up. Usually I'm a hot coffee guy in the morning. A little iced coffee today.
There you go.
Um,
Homemade.
I mean, we have an espresso machine, so yeah. I mean, I guess so I put ice in a cup, and
Bougie
yeah,
shit.
you know what I mean. Yeah. So we keep it nice over here with the
I
coffee.
think I can't remember if we had this conversation on the pod or if we had this
Mhm.
conversation in person. What would you say
They all run
is
together.
the classiest thing that you own or
Mm.
that you have in your house?
Classiest. Ooh,
Or
that's
bougie if
tough.
you want to go bougie.
Yeah,
Espresso
I
machine's
mean
pretty bougie.
yeah, I mean, it's literally a pod coffee machine. It's more like ease of use. It's just super easy. And also, my wife Lorena doesn't really drink much coffee anymore, so it's
Mm,
mostly just me. And so, one thing that I think it does help me do usually when I have hot coffee is because I've talked about this before, having like the Yeti cup keeps it really hot. So I have like 1 cup per day
right,
usually,
right.
because then that way I kind of work my way through it. Whereas if I had like a drip coffee machine and I mean, I guess with the Yeti it would still apply, but it's just like I'm making enough for 1 cup. Like, I'm not gonna be having multiple. But to your question, bougiest thing or like classiest thing we have. So when we did our part one of 2 wedding ceremonies over the summer, um, my brother-in-law, which still getting used to some of those terms that are now part of my life, but brother-in-law and his girlfriend gave us these like super nice like crystal champagne glasses.
Ooh, damn.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm not even sure where they are in the house because I shouldn't know. Because
Yeah.
I'm never gonna be the one to take them out because it's like holding a newborn baby. Like we should only break them out when my wife decides, yes, this is an appropriate time. So only she should know where they are. I don't even know where they are, but those are really, really fancy. We did use them the night that we did, like I said, part 1 of 2 of our wedding. But I think that's probably like the bougiest, classiest thing that we have. How about you guys?
I mean, we got a record player. I think some people would call that classy. Other people would just be like, most people have record players these days since the record boom. French press coffee machine, French press
Yeah, it's
coffee
pretty
machine
good.
versus the Ninja. We have a Ninja, but I'm really the only one drinking coffee at this point too, because after
Right.
Danielle's pregnancy, she's like has had an aversion to coffee at this point. It makes her nauseous, so she doesn't really drink too much coffee anymore. But other than that, man, yeah, maybe the podcast stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Like I mean, we have a lot of like in my house, we have a lot of gadgets, but I don't know if I would classify a lot of them as like classy or like bougie. We just have a lot of shit. Like we
Yeah.
have a lot of shit for like random like we talk about this with our girls all the time where it's just like I don't know what that thing is. What does it do? Like you and I don't know what half the stuff is, but they're like, why aren't you using the apple slicer? I'm like, I don't know. I used a fucking knife to cut it. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Like, what we have one? Like, I didn't know that this was a thing. Like, there's a lot of that type of stuff around where I'm just like, I didn't even know we had it. So I think that's
I
more the
feel you on
story.
that. And by the way, everyone that's tuning in right now, we are going to talk about basketball here in just a second. We're going to talk about Luke Kornet, who is balling. We'll talk about Lonnie Walker, maybe a little Jordan Walsh sprinkled in
Definitely some
there.
Jordan Walsh.
We're going to go into the Netflix Starting Five documentary, quote unquote documentary. That's on Netflix right now. And later today, we're actually going to have Cerruti of the Ryan Russillo podcast. He's going to be joining us to talk about the NBA at large. And with Cerruti, we love talking about random shit. As you guys can tell right now, the first 5 minutes here, we have not touched on basketball. With Cerruti, I'm sure we're going to talk about the gadgets in our houses that only our wives know how to use and things like that. So tune in later on today. That's going to be at 4 Eastern. We'll go live on Twitter again with Cerruti. If you listen
as
to
well
the
on YouTube for that one. So we'll be
yeah,
live on YouTube
we'll be
for that.
on.
If
We'll
you
be
guys
on
are listening to
YouTube.
this live right now, and if you're listening to this as it's recorded and dropped as a podcast, that will be up later this week in podcast form as well. But if you want to jump, make sure you're following us on Twitter. Make sure you're following us on YouTube, and we will have that for you guys later.
Join
today.
us with questions. If you listen to the Ryan Russillo podcast, you know that they do life advice. So who knows if you guys tune in and throw some
Do some
questions
dad
into the
advice.
chat. Yeah,
Yeah,
some dad advice.
we'll get to that.
Steal
Some
some
dad
parent
advice, some
corner
wife
from Bill
advice,
Simmons.
stuff like that. Yeah, so we'll get into that with Suri later today. But Greg, let's jump into some preseason
Yeah, let's do
basketball
it.
here. The rare and I think probably unnecessary back-to-back preseason back-to-back, which I just don't know why you would ever do that. I mean, I did listen to, I can't remember who it was recently, but was saying like that NBA teams kind of like colleges set up their own preseason schedule. So this is of our own doing. So maybe it's on purpose to get ready for the
Yeah,
season.
I think it's just to get the guys at the end of the bench a look. You know, you're going to
Right.
play your starters one game and then sit them the second one.
Yeah. So, and also, so for the Celtics, this was their back to back this preseason. They play the 76ers on Saturday night and just an absolute drubbing 139-89. To be fair, they were on their second night of a back to back for that. So they rest. They basically put out their B or even C team against the A team for the Celtics. And it very much looked like a C team versus an A team in that game. And then on Sunday night, the Celtics put out their B/C team against kind of an B plus team for the Raptors, still playing Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, a few others of their main rotation. But the Celtics come away with a 115-111 victory to remain undefeated. At this point, Greg, obviously records, throw them out the window. It's preseason. Nice. The Celtics are 4-0. Not going to be the main storylines that we talk about, but there are several guys that you mentioned that are certainly noteworthy of talking about in this preseason so far. We could start with Luke Kornet. We could go to Lonnie Walker. I think Jordan Walsh is a talking point as well. Who do you want to start with today? I know you got a couple of highlights queued up here.
Well, I think this is probably the preseason of Luke Kornet. You know, it seems like there are a lot of articles being written on Luke. He's getting his chance to start right now with Horford sitting for the preseason, with
Potentially
Porzingis
longer too.
being out. Yeah, potentially longer. There's been a lot of talk about him actually getting the starting role. They've talked about it on the broadcast. Shout out to Scal, shout out to Drew Carter for actually touching on this, whether or not Luke is ready to elevate into that starting role and just keep Al Horford in a 20 to 25 minute role off the bench. There's no reason to overtax Al Horford right now. We know what he can do if he needs to start at some point in the season. We know that Al Horford can start, but if you're looking at long-term, for the Celtics' success in the playoffs this year, if Kristaps Porzingis misses a majority of time in the playoffs like he did last year, we're going to need somebody besides Al Horford to step up into that 5 role. And Luke Kornet, if he's just used to playing the starting center role, that might be a really good spot for him to develop chemistry with these guys. Because I got to say, man, Luke looks phenomenal so far this preseason.
Yeah, Luke's been all over the place, man. And I do think the idea of starting him, I like it. I like that idea a lot. Like you mentioned the preservation, and of course, it doesn't prevent you from ending the game with Al Horford if you just start Luke and Luke gets, a few more minutes than Al. Like it's in the regular season, and you're still going to have Tillman and Cato available to play in those games as well to supplement minutes. So you're going to have different looks that Mazzulla can go to. But Luke's looked great this postseason or this preseason, man. He really has. He's been, we talked about this before the preseason started, right? Like, what does Luke bring versus Kada versus Tillman? And it's his IQ, it's his steadiness, it's his consistency of having been here the last couple of years. But he's added to his game, man. He really has. And, I think one of the things that really stood out to me has been some of his passing. just in the short roll, or just, just being able to make these looks and reads that are so important, especially because even though we've talked about he came into the league as kind of a stretch five, doesn't really seem like that's ever going to go back to being a thing, at least right now. If we're going to start to see, the hints of it, it would be now, and he's not shooting three. So I think we can just kind of take that off the board, even though that was something that he came into the league as. And so if he's going to be the role guy, I'm calling him a vertical threat. He's 7'2", so he is a vertical threat just by
he's great. He's a great lob threat. Yeah,
right, exactly. So if that's going to be his role in this team, him adding the ability to make that extra pass, to kick it out to so many of the dynamic shooters that he's going to be surrounded with in that starting lineup, that's just another weapon that this team has. And you saw at the beginning of that Sixers game, he had 10 points in the first 6 minutes. And I know that was the Sixers B team, but it still shows you, okay, listen, you guys might think Luke's the guy that you can forget about. Don't mistake for a second. Luke can actually still punish you if given the opportunity. And so I think Luke, if he is going to be the starter, I would have zero problems with it. I actually, when I first heard that, I think maybe it was asked of Missoula, or it was just talked about in the broadcast. At first I was like, nah, this is Al. Like, Al should be the starter. But the more you think about it, like, I actually do think it starts to make more and more sense the more I marinate on it. So I'm all in on the Luke Kornet starting position. Let's keep Al on the bench. That way he just stays in a consistent rhythm all year. Not that he can't go back and forth. We saw him do that just fine last year and didn't really affect his rhythm. But for preserving Al long term, I'm in on the Luke Kornet starting train.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of quotes here. This first one, courtesy of Justin Turpin on Twitter. This is Jaylen Brown on Luke Kornet. And then we have a second quote, courtesy of Noah Dalzell from Joe Missoula. So we're going to start with the Jaylen quote on Luke from the press conference after the Sixers game. We also have some plays queued up to kind of break down some things that Luke is doing well on the offensive side. They talk a little bit about defense in these two quotes here, but we're just going to focus on offense when we get into the clips. So here is Jaylen Brown on Luke Kornet.
Can you speak about that connection? Yeah, just Luke knows how to play, being in the right place at the right time. So being able to find him and get him going helps our offense and everybody else get easy ones. So we look forward to being able for Luke to be able to step up and make plays for us on both ends. He's a big part of our offense.
And I really like this quote coming from Jaylen, because it really seemed like Jaylen was developing a nice little chemistry with Luke. He was looking for him throughout that Sixers game. He came out, I think he had like 4 assists in the first quarter.
Yeah.
Jaylen looks great, by the way. We can do a whole nother podcast on Jaylen, but
we're going to do so many podcasts on him and Tatum. I'm happy Tatum shot looks good. Jaylen looks awesome. We're going to save that for the regular season. Let's keep this with the guys that are going to get the shine right now.
Right. But the reason I bring that up is because I'm going to show you some plays where Jaylen Brown is creating for Luke Kornet. So on this play here, this is Jaylen. He's coming up in transition, makes a nice move on the right sideline. And what the Celtics are doing with Luke, right? They run that 5 out. And a lot of times you'll see the 5-man is at the top of the key, just in general in offenses where the Celtics like to run that delay action. But they've had Luke on the slot, right? So if you think about like foul line extended out to the 3-point line, that's where Luke has been operating. They've been running those wide pin downs where you can do an empty side pick and roll after that. We'll show a clip of that here in a second. But this first one, this is in transition. Luke runs to his spot at the slot on the left wing. Jaylen Brown makes a nice move to the basket. And the thing I like about Luke, you brought up how he came into the league billed as the stretch 5. So, him coming into the league, he probably would have stayed at the 3-point line. But here he reads Jaylen, he sees the slot cut available, cuts to the rim for a nice dunk.
Couple times, I wasn't expecting that so far.
Brown in the spin cycle.
Another hammer. That's a great cut by Kornet.
Yeah, and you hear Scal shout that out. Great cut by Kornet. This is something, if you think back to the Miami Heat when they were killing it with the big 3 there, LeBron James was often on the slot, and anytime D Wade would drive to the basket, LeBron would make that cut, or vice versa. If LeBron was cutting, D-Wade would make he would make the cut to the basket. So I was really happy to see that play.
How many times do you think Luke Kornet has been compared to LeBron James in any sentence in the history of the world?
5 times in his life. Yeah. And it's normally like LeBron James attacking Luke Kornet.
Right. No, and I love that example too. And I think that speaks to one of the things that makes the Celtics, who, by the way, they just overall the Celtics look ready to attack a title, as Joe Mazzulla like I said. This team from top to bottom looks ready for this regular season, which is going to start on October 22nd. Is, and Jalen kind of talked about it in that quote that you played, where, just kind of like they have this bond, right? Like they kind of know where each other's supposed to be. It's that continuity and connectivity that so many teams in the NBA don't have year to year, but not even just this team running it back fully from last year, but aside from, Jordan Walsh, who's going into a second year, KP and Drew, who are now going into their second year with the team. Like, this is Luke's third, fourth year with the team. Pritchard's been here since he's been drafted. Hauser's been here since he's been drafted. We know Jalen, Jason, Derek White's now going into his fourth full year with this team. Like, this is a team that they really know each other, and Luke is such a good example. And it's the reason that he has grown his playing time year over year. And now you see him out there, and he looks as if he belonged with the Stars because he's played enough minutes, filling in for Al Horford 2 years ago, filling in for Al and KP last year, that he has a rhythm, he has a connection with them, and then has been able to develop what he can do in his own comfortability around these star players and being a star in his role. And that's a great example of just the next level of it. And then the star guys having eyes for Kornet, acknowledging the work that he puts in, and then continuing that bond. And that's one of the things that's just really going to, I think, separate the Celtics regular season and really all season long across the NBA.
Yeah, and think about what you need Luke to do when you have the 4 other guys in the starting lineup: Derek White, Drew Holiday, and the Jays. Like, Luke Kornet just has to be a great screener, and he has to be a role threat, and that's literally all he has to do. Yeah, don't fuck it up, Luke. But he's doing more than not fucking it up. Right?
Exactly.
So here's another great example. I'm going to pull up a clip here. So the Celtics are in 5 out here. Derek White is kind of in the delay spot at the top of the key, and they go empty side wide pin down for Jason Tatum on the left side. Those of you that are listening on the audio feed, go to our YouTube page for this section as we break down these plays so you can kind of visualize a little bit more what we're talking about here. But just all 5 guys are out on the perimeter here. Derek White has the ball at the top of the key. You're going to see Luke Kornet set a wide pin down for Jason Tatum, who curls off of that wide pin down. He gets the ball, perfect pass from Derek White. And because it's an empty side 2-man action on the left side of the court, Luke Kornet has no help side in his way. As Jason Tatum attracts all the defense, Luke just rolls on the baseline, and Tatum hits him with the alley-oop.
It's not really like that, but I should give it a shot. But I love the show about quarterbacks. Kornet on the stuff. Tatum spoon-fed him. It's a great play by Tatum coming off that pin down.
It was actually Holiday that was at the top of the key, but point still stands, right? Tatum comes off. All the defense is looking at Jason Tatum, Luke Kornet wide open. And he, although it's a little silly to think about Luke Kornet being a vertical threat because he can't jump that high. As you said, he's 7'2" and he's a great lob finisher. Luke has always been a great lob finisher during his time with the Celtics. So those types of plays right there, especially early offense where the defense isn't necessarily set. It seems like that was a big focus of the Celtics in the preseason, is pushing the ball. And Will, one thing I was wondering, and I wonder if this stood out to you at all. The Celtics seemed like they were playing at a pace where they are trying to steal some stuff out of the Indiana Pacers playbook. Like, there was so much where they were just flying the ball up the court. Jaylen Brown's pushing the ball. Everybody's pushing the ball, trying to get those Nash cuts along the baseline, trying to get second and third pick and roll early offense, and really just pushing the pace.
Yeah, I like that. One of the things that we noted from the Pacers series is how structured chaos their movement is on offense below the 3-point line, right?
Yeah.
There's this constant movement, constant cutting. And so I do like that. I don't know if that stuck out to me quite much. I don't know if I mentioned I've had for those listening, I had internet trouble all weekend here. So kind of in and out watching some of these games. So I'm going to have to look for that a little bit more. But I definitely have noticed this team just being more active. in general, one of the things that I think Missoula might have talked about this right before the start of the preseason, maybe out in Abu Dhabi, that offensive rebounding was something key for them that they're working on. And so last year, that was one of the few stats where they weren't top 10. They were middle of the pack. And part of that's the 5-out majority offense. There's not a lot of people around the basket, right? So you're going to get some long kickouts, but you're not going to get a ton. One thing I've noticed that definitely been a concentrated effort is multiple guys crashing from both sides of the court on shots and trying to keep balls alive. And, it's the preseason, but right now, if you just look at their average amount per game of offensive rebounds, they're third in the NBA in the preseason. They were 14th in the league last year. The number kind of inconsequential when it's the preseason. So we'll see if that carries over. But, that is something that has stood out. And so I think, even though those are different points that we're making, I think they are similar in the sense of the activity and just the movement that you're constantly seeing, that there's not that there's a ton of standing around last year, but you're seeing more movement, more plays like you just highlighted here, and that you're constantly seeing more of those slot cuts. You're seeing more movement across the baseline, and it's really crashes. A focus. Yeah, corner crashes, exactly. It's just definitely there's been an emphasis on constant movement, it feels like, from Missoula.
Definitely. Yeah. And just like coming back to Luke here as we finish up the Luke segment, I just want to show Luke here in transition. So this is a great play here. This is Luke on defense, not doing the typical Kornet contest, actually contesting a shot out at the 3-point line. And I don't know if this is something that they're working on with Luke and their centers, anybody that's contesting a shot, but he contests at the 3-point line, like out at the 3-point line, and then he flies by and then just sprints down the court. Almost some people might call this a cherry pick. I think it's just probably solid offensive strategy here as he beats his man down the court. I think he ends up with McCain, the rookie out of Duke, who actually I really liked.
Yeah, I thought he actually looked pretty solid.
Yeah. He looked strong out there. But then Jalen bring the ball up the court, kind of no look pass to Luke under the basket for a layup. And then I want to go to the Missoula clip, and then I have one more Luke clip on offense.
McCain can't answer with a 3. Brown will start the transition. Oh, feed the beast. Feed the beast. The moose is loose.
Real quick, Greg, one thing I love about all these clips, it's within the first 3 minutes of the game. Each time all of these offensive clips so far from Kornet, that was the latest one. It was 11-7 by the time he caught it. So I just love the early offense coming from Luke in that Sixers game.
We got to get Drew back on the pod here. He seems so much more comfortable this season, not having to split time with Mike Orman. Drew's been
I mean now he's a full-time starter, right? He went from rookie getting partial minutes to now it's his gig, right? So it's just him and Scal are off to the races this season.
Yeah, it's been great. Shout out to Drew. All right, I want to play the clip here from Joe Missoula just talking about Luke Kornet. Once again, this is courtesy of Noah Dalzell on Twitter.
Just Luke at the beginning of the game had a nice stretch there. Just how is he fitting there with those guys, and have you seen any kind of progression from him from last season?
Yeah, I mean it's he's worked really hard this summer, and I've definitely seen him get better. Just his screen reads, his spacing recognition. He's one of our best defenders because of his ability to communicate on the fly the different stuff that we do on every single possession, and he does a great job of reading each possession, and I think he's gotten really better offensively up until this point, just with his screening angles and his spacing recognition mostly, and he continues to get better and better.
So obviously that video came from Noah, but I think that was John Corrales' voice that you heard asking the question. So Missoula mentions Luke, his spatial awareness. So this next play that I want to show, this is Luke. I think he maneuvers his way into the dunker spot and ends up with an alley-oop. For those of you that aren't familiar with what the dunker spot is, it's just that short baseline area that you see Drew Holiday playing in a lot. If you think about the Nuggets, this is where Aaron Gordon makes his living, where Nikola Jokic, when they run that 3-man action, hits him for those alley-oops just off of the
Rob
baseline.
Williams previously made a living for the Celtics in that area as well.
Absolutely.
Not fair. Oh, amazing. Starters back out there. And Kornet stays hot. Give him the moose.
So I'm going to play that one more time because Missoula in that clip talks about Luke's spatial recognition. And I just want you to look at all the different spaces that Luke Kornet occupies on this play, because he's in I think two different actions here. The first one, he's rolling to the basket with Jalen, who probably could have thrown him the lob initially, doesn't. Luke is in the paint, and then as the ball goes to Drew Holiday in the corner, he kind of backs out of the paint into the dunker spot. And then as Derek White gets the ball on the strong side of the court, he ends up rolling out of the dunker spot to the basket.
Not fair. Oh, amazing. Starters back out there. And Kornet stays hot. Give him the moose.
I mean, that's just exactly what you want out of a big man playing with this group, right? And you think about Al Horford versus Luke. Obviously, Al is a threat out at the 3-point line, but if they want rim pressure, one of the things that's going to open up a lot for them is having a vertical threat on the court. And I think Luke Kornet at this point in his career is a far better vertical threat than Al Horford.
Yeah, and even it's funny. I feel like if you were to go around asking Celtics fans who's a better vertical threat, Luke Kornet or Neemias Queta, I feel like the instant reaction, because he's more athletic, would be to say Queta, but I think the answer might be Luke Kornet. Like, just
because of his awareness.
His awareness and his consistency, and like you said, like it was a pretty tough lob that he just finished in that clip that you showed of Derek White throwing that up there. And when you watch Queta, a lot of times it's a catch and either he comes down with it and he misses it and he gets the offensive rebound, or there's a lot that might happen with Luke. It's ultra consistent, right? Like you know what you're getting, and I think you get probably a much higher rate of finishing that play with Luke versus Queta, which is the biggest difference that we talked about going into the season between the two, is knowing what you're going to get with Luke night in and night out. And so yeah, I think that's a great example of why Luke makes so much sense for this team and why he really is more than he is. That, I mean, we're guilty of it too over the last couple years of not giving him enough credit, and to see where he's at now. Like I said, coming back to it, all in Luke Kornet, starting 5. Let's put him in there, Joe. I like it. I could use that as a transition to starting 5, but we're not ready to go there yet. I do want to touch on a few more guys here in the preseason. Just a quick shout out to Preseason P. Dude loves the preseason. So much fun watching Peyton Pritchard in the preseason. Always then leaves me to wonder what this could look like. And I did think about this morning, Greg, and I didn't plan to spend much time on Peyton Pritchard, but as you watch him when he gets these reps, there is a world where, maybe 2 years from now or year after next, like at some point, Drew Holiday and Kristaps are probably not going to be on this team in the near future. I don't know when that's going to be, if it's after this year, if it's after 2 years, but there's a world in which in his I think Peyton Pritchard's contract starts either this year or next year. I can't remember, but it's a 4-year deal. So within that contract, there's a pretty good chance that it's starter Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum. Like that's a realistic possibility at some point over the next 2 or 3 seasons. So I think even though this is just kind of fun, it lives in its own world, preseason P, like there is a real translation to this down the line at some point. So just always something that I think that's interesting, especially with the cap crunch here. But a couple of guys that I want to talk about here before we move on to the starting 5 documentary. Lonnie Walker and Jordan Walsh. I feel like that's kind of the talking points around Twitter, and even Scal mentioned on the broadcast. He's like, at halftime, I was walking around, everyone's asking, is Lonnie Walker going to make the team? And, Lonnie had a really big game against the Raptors the other night. And I think Lonnie has shown that, this is why when we had Corrales on and we've talked about it, like him on an Exhibit 10 deal, like this guy's an NBA player. Like he's in his mid-20s. Like he's definitely an NBA player. I don't know if it's going to be with the Celtics, but the growth of Jordan Walsh is kind of coming hand in hand right here. And I think we mentioned them too, along with Baylor Shireman, who's had somewhat of I would say, underwhelming preseason.
He's not going to play for this team.
It's been underwhelming. And so I think it comes down to the Jordan Walsh, Lonnie Walker conversation. And one of the things that I said was Lonnie Walker's going to make this team if it feels like both Jordan Walsh and Baylor Shireman are not ready for even those O'Shea Brissett minutes. It feels like Jordan Walsh is ready for those minutes. And I think long-term makes the most sense to give him those minutes. But I still would like Lonnie on this team, but it's going to come down to just a money thing of whether or not they think it's worth it. But what have been your thoughts on, you can take either Walsh or Walker here. Let's talk about both of them, but give us your thoughts on whichever way you want to go.
Well, remember when we were doing our preview, I mentioned that it was really between Lonnie Walker and Jaden Springer because Jaden Springer has that contract.
Lonnie Walker's win that bet. I'll tell you that much right now.
Oh, yeah. In the first 2 games in Abu Dhabi, Jaden Springer got his opportunity, right? And I think we were like, is Lonnie Walker even going to get a chance? It's a preseason. So the way that they kind of give people chances, it comes in spurts, right? So Lonnie Walker got his chance the last 2 games as Springer kind of was relegated to, where he probably is in the rotation, which is the 14th or 15th man. Lonnie Walker is talented enough to be in this rotation for sure. What I was really interested in with Walker was how much they were having him actually run point guard and run pick and roll. I didn't have I couldn't get the numbers on the advanced stats on how many pick and rolls he ran, but it seemed like that was a big focus of the offense, was putting the ball in Lonnie Walker's hands with shooters spacing around him. They didn't have Peyton Pritchard necessarily on the ball the entire time he was on the court with Lonnie Walker. He was actually spacing the floor. So was Sam Hauser. And it seemed like that's what they were trying to do with Lonnie Walker, was to see, what could he be as a backup point guard, that could come in so Peyton Pritchard could still function as a floor spacer, because Peyton's looked great on the ball. Yeah. I think his primary asset on the court is his floor spacing. So if you have Lonnie Walker, who I think a lot of people were thinking more of just a wing complement there, if he can actually be a primary ball handler for a second unit, that actually opens up a lot of things for that second unit, where you can still have like a Derek White spacing on and playing his normal role off the ball, and Lonnie Walker being a little bit more of a featured playmaker. He had 7 assists against the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know what he had last night against the Raptors. He was a little bit more of a scorer last.
Only one against the Raptors, but I think your point still stands. So as far as him handling the ball, and I like that point that you're making here of, because when you think about, let's say Lonnie Walker doesn't make the team, I think JD Davison is just bound to be a two-way guy. As long as he's with the Celtics, there's not going to be much of a spot. So once you look, obviously you have Drew, Derek, and Jason in the starting lineup, and all 3 of them can be the main ball handler at different points, and even Jalen at certain times. But then on that bench, it's kind of Pritchard can be that guy, and almost really no one else, just from a pure bench perspective. So I do think that's an interesting case for Lonnie Walker to make this team. I mean, I think, listen, it's not my money. And, if he's going to cost $2 million, which is really $8 to $10 million. And so it's the Celtics are still going to be, whether or not they have Lonnie Walker, the CBA restrictions that come along with being a second tax Abraham, it still applies whether or not they pay him the extra tax, or that's not going
right.
To
but
him,
if you trade Jaden Springer, who's making like $4 million, then it's not that big a deal,
Yeah, but the question is, how do you I don't think he's shown much for someone to be like, oh yeah, I want to take Jaden Springer and give you a second round pick. It's probably more like, I want a second round pick to take him at this point.
That's fair.
So you do have to have him on. So that's the issue with that, because Jaden Springer's contract is guaranteed, so he's going to be on. Even if the Celtics waive him, as reading earlier, they still have to pay him everything. So he's going to be on this team. Like it's not going to make any sense to just let him go. So. Yeah, so it's going to come down to, do they want to pay Lonnie Walker that? Is it worth it for a guy that, he's going to be the 9th to 11th man somewhere in that spot? And, and like I said, going to Jordan Walsh, I think Jordan Walsh has looked really good in this preseason. Like I was a little somewhat, I don't want to say down, but wasn't feeling great about him after Summer League. He did not look the way that I was hoping for a progression, and we talked ourselves into it. Hey, he's still only 20. He's like, let's really think about it. This is junior year of college, and he's looked like a guy that's had a taste of NBA, and now is getting, he's a McDonald's All-American. He has the pedigree for it, right? Like he's looking more like that guy. The jump shot looks way smoother this year. Looks more confident. He's shooting 38% from 3 on 16 shots so far in the preseason. He had 10 rebounds in 30 minutes against the Raptors last night. So I love the idea that Jordan Walsh is another one, and I'm not putting him in the Jalen and Jason category, but that's just a wing. He's a wing that can also, play a little bit above his size with his athleticism and his length, like his long ass arms. Like that's going to be trouble for teams.
7'3" wingspan, I think.
Yeah, it's something insane. And so, I think also, like, I would love to keep both of them. If they don't, for the financial reasons, I understand. But I do think Jordan Walsh is ready to get at least the first crack, I think, at those O'Shea Brissett minutes, because he's just got more long-term capital with the Celtics than Lonnie Walker does. But I would love Lonnie as kind of a security blanket to have. So if Wick doesn't give a shit about writing checks anymore because he's trying to sell the team. Maybe that hurts selling the team. I don't know what that does, but that's what's going to come down to. Pure finance is not going to affect how this team can manage the roster. But I'm excited for what I've seen out of Jordan Walsh.
Yeah, I know that your internet was a little funky yesterday, but Scal yesterday, I feel like Scal has done this multiple times. I feel like Scal listens to Green with Envy because he always steals my comparisons. Like when I compared Scotty Barnes his rookie year to year 2 Giannis, like I'm a year later, Scal saying that, right? Now I compare Jordan Walsh to Andre Iguodala on the broadcast last night. Scal compares Jordan Walsh to Andre Iguodala.
Oh, I missed that. I didn't get to that.
And
part.
I'm like, man, Scal, like, just come on the show. Stop asking for a fee. You know? Goddamn, Scal. But I think with Jordan Walsh, you know, the 3-point shot, to be able to play on this team, you have to be able to shoot if you're a wing. That's why I don't think Jaden Springer has a spot on this team, and he's not. Like Lonnie Walker's a better pick and roll player than Jaden Springer is, right? So I don't think Jaden Springer is going to be able to crack a rotation with this team.
And there's enough good defenders that, you know, like it's great that Jaden Springer's a great defender, but there's enough defenders that you can get by with what Lonnie Walker can give you. Like that's not going to break the integrity of your defense with what else you're going to put out there with him.
For sure. And Jordan Walsh's 3-point shot looks great. You actually texted me the other day a thread of his 3-point shot. It looks beautiful. Looks very Derek White-esque. It's smooth. There's not a lot of extra movement to it. Not a lot of variability to the shot. So it looks great. And then one of my favorite thing is his awareness on the court, both ends of the court. I think he's a very smart player. There was this one play yesterday against the Raptors where I think it was either 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1 break where Jordan Walsh was the lone defender getting back, and he kind of like stunted at the ball handler and was able to play 2 and deflected the ball and just saved a layup, you know, and just like little things like that. Jordan Walsh, I think, has great instincts, and he's so young that it makes a lot of sense to keep him, you know, long-term future for this team. Jordan Walsh should be a part of things, and I agree that I think he should get the first crack at a rotation spot.
Yeah, he needs to get some of that experience because I think it's not sink or swim time by any means for Jordan Walsh, but it's like let's start to nibble at like what can this be with Jordan Walsh short term and long term. And I think if you do keep Lonnie Walker, it makes it all that much easier because you're like, okay, cool, we still have Lonnie Walker. If we feel like Jordan needs to like, hey, why don't you sit back and let's do some tape work, and you know Lonnie can take those couple of minutes for a few weeks here. You have that, and I'm sure there'll be different times that
Lonnie is like he's almost insurance for like a month or 2-month long Derek White or Jaylen Brown injury.
No, that's a great point. I thought about this actually while I was watching that Raptors game this morning. Is the Celtics got a bill of health? Like they other than Porzingis, who, you know, that's Porzingis, right? Porzingis getting to 55 games every single year is we're going to sweat it out, and as long as he's on this team, that's going to be the case, and that's why we have 4 different centers that we can play, and then they kind of live in their own category of the roster because we're going to have multiple guys running in and out. We didn't have any prolonged absences of Derek White, of Drew Holiday, of Jason Tatum, of Jaylen Brown. It's a long NBA season. 3 out of those 4 guys are coming off an Olympic run. Jaylen Brown's been traveling all over the world. Like they've been in the finals, the conference finals, and the finals the last 3 years. An injury is almost more than likely to happen than anything else to at least one of those guys at some point. And you're 100% right. I think that's the other major case for fuck it, let's pay Lonnie and have him there, because you saw the offense that he can put up, like, and you see the ball handling. You see he's exactly what you just said. He's the insurance for that. Or if there is a month that we need to go without one of those guys, you can backfill some offense. You can backfill some ball handling. You can not have to, you know, exude other pressure on those other guys to make sure they stay healthy. If one of them goes down, you're not leaning too heavily on Tatum or too heavily on Drew Holiday, whoever it is. And so that's the other, I think, critical point for Lonnie Walker that he would provide, that there's not really many people on this roster can give you that insurance. But Lonnie Walker could be a guy that doesn't really play much. All of a sudden there's an injury and he's playing 15 minutes a night to try to help, you know, level the tide. And I think that would probably be the biggest case that I would make for why Lonnie Walker, regardless of what it's going to cost, is that it's probably worth it because we're going for it anyways. So why not have the insurance to back it up? So that's an excellent point right there. Yeah, well, one more preseason game for the Celtics here, and then we get kind of a week off before we tip off against the Knicks. We're getting spicy against the Wolves tonight. I don't know if you saw that. That was interesting.
I did.
We may have to bring that up with Cerruti a little bit and talk a little bit as we do our NBA season preview later. But for this episode, let's go ahead and move over to the Starting Five show on Netflix featuring Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. If you're not familiar, this is a documentary that was filmed last year. It's a 10-part docuseries on Netflix right now, following Jason Tatum, LeBron James, Anthony Edwards, Domantas Sabonis, and Jimmy Butler throughout their journeys last year. I've only seen the first 2 episodes, was planning on watching quite a few episodes yesterday. Again, Spectrum, big fuck you, just not working yesterday. Not great. So if you got any internet suggestions out there and you're in the Austin, Texas area, please let me know. Although I think all internet companies kind of suck, so it is what it is. But Starting Five on Netflix, I've only gotten through a few episodes. Greg, you've cranked through the whole thing. So I want to start with your impressions and see where you want to go with this, because even just through 2 episodes, I have a couple of thoughts and comments, but I want to see since you've watched the whole thing, what your thoughts were.
Okay, so if you have not tuned in to this and you're on the fence about whether or not you should watch it, I just want to throw this out there that it's an uninterrupted production and it is a lot of LeBron James. So if you have a visceral reaction to LeBron James and you just like can't really buy into watching a lot of LeBron James, this documentary probably is not for you.
I mean, here's the counterpoint, Greg. Here's the counterpoint. He's just a normal guy. He's a normal dad doing normal dad stuff, right? Like everyone for Halloween has an entire makeup team come over to their house and do prosthetics. And, it's just a very normal dad thing, right? Like, I mean,
and everybody can quote Beetlejuice.
Yeah. Dude, I was dying at that opening scene when it was like him and his kids just trying to describe how normal their life is. I'm like, dude, you have like 17 people running makeup on your Halloween party. You're not normal. Like I understand that you're trying to act like things are normal. Like this is not normal in any fucking household.
Yeah. I will say LeBron's daughter, Zuri, very cute. Very cute. Made me want eventually, because I want, like, I have a boy, right? I have little baby James, still a little over 3 months, and we're gonna have more kids if we get that blessing. And I want more boys. Like I want the next kid to be another boy, so that James has a little brother that he can play on sports teams with and whatnot.
James, but little Domantas Sabonis, we talked about over the weekend.
Right? Yeah, he's very Sabonis-like. But it made me like think about how nice it would be to have a baby girl. Yeah, but with the James family. I was watching it with Danielle, so this is a second takeaway. If your spouse or significant other is not really that into sports, I think this is kind of the perfect documentary for you to be able to watch with your spouse, so that they could just kind of like get into the family life and just like seeing the players as human beings, because that was her big takeaway. She doesn't really know anything about LeBron James. She doesn't know anything about his manufactured media personality and his image and all that. So she was just like, oh, LeBron seems like a good guy and seems like just a suburban dad, like a goofy suburban dad. I was like, that is exactly what he wants you to see. So it worked. It worked for that.
Goal of the documentary. That's his goal. And like, to be fair, the Starting Five documentary, this all goes all the way back to Netflix doing this with F1, which is what kind of led F1 to take off. They've done it with golf, they've done it with tennis. They had the quarterbacks version for the NFL like a year ago, which I actually didn't watch. I haven't watched most. I've watched a few episodes of each of these, but not really kind of like, I don't know. This is made for that demographic that you just talked about. Like if you're a diehard sicko, kind of like we are, there's nuggets in there that are real, that are interesting for us, but it is more made for the casual fan who maybe isn't quite as exposed. Like we know, I mean, it's going through all of last year. We know every single result that happened last year. We covered every single result. And so there's a few like on court, like mic'd up things. There's, a few behind the scenes things, like when Anthony Edwards leaves the game at halftime to go like for his baby being born. That was pretty cool. I liked seeing like that was interesting to watch. Like I knew that happened, but like
Anthony Edwards super committed in his relationship to not
good timing for that, as he's fighting over some custody battles.
Got like 3 baby mamas.
Yeah, exactly. But seeing those type of shots is interesting for me, but it's like few and far between, because it's a little Disney-esque, right? Like it's made for a larger commercial audience, but there still are some interesting pieces to it. Greg, I know you have a pretty good Joe Mazzulla quote that I think you should pull up here, because I want to talk about this.
For sure. Before we talk about Joe, I just want to give a quick shout to the production team and the editing team. I thought bringing Anthony Edwards in at the very end of episode 1, where like the first shots of him, you don't even see his face. You just hear the voiceover of him. Just like, I don't look up to anybody in the league. He's walking down the hall. You only see his back with this hoodie on. And then it's like a close up of his face. And he gives that Ant Edwards confident smirk as Run the Jewels, ooh la la, comes in. Like, that was pretty
Great
sick.
song, that song worked so well over so many in so many just different shows and movies. But like you mentioned, so my wife Lorena was watching. Well, she wasn't really watching. She was just in the room, and so she was kind of half watching a little bit of the couple episodes that I watched. And just between the end of that episode and the beginning of the next episode, which focused on Anthony Edwards, her only comment was, "Man, this guy could be a little bit more humble." I was like, "Yeah, that's not really his thing. That's not really really what he does."
Danielle didn't know like how old any of the people were. So when she found out that Anthony Edwards was 22, she was like, "Oh, that makes so much sense why he's exactly the way he is. He's just some dumb kid, you know?" And like
he's delaying fucking Thanksgiving with his family to play Fortnite, which drove me insane.
He has his uncle
I was
Drew
so mad how
pack
rude
his
that was.
bags for him.
Did
you see that? He has Uncle Drew there on retainer to pack his bags for him.
And his reasoning is, "I've never packed a bag before. Why start now?" That was literally what he said on the show.
How many diapers has Anthony Edwards changed in his life?
What's up?
How many diapers do you think he's changed?
Somehow -4. Like, I don't even know how that's possible, but it's -4.
He's walked out of the room on 4 diapers.
Yeah, I think there's a higher chance of that than he's changed positively for. Like, there's just got to be. Yeah, it's like I said, there's some good insights on the show. Let's go to the Joe quote though. Let's
okay. Yeah, I'll pull it up here. You're still gonna see me and Will here for those on YouTube because it's a vertical screen. So you know, just watch Joe. Don't watch our faces.
It seems to me that Jason has to deal with unfair criticism.
Gets to deal with.
Yeah.
He gets to deal with it. It's the ultimate compliment. You know, and that's what we talk about. It's like, this is what you asked for.
So, I'd seen this clip going around. Number one, I actually really agree with what Joe's saying. The way Joe says things cracks me up. He says it as if he's correcting a grammatical mistake that you just made. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and shit. Yeah.
Yeah. He's just like, no, I don't think you understand how the English language works. He gets to. I'm sorry. I like a super, like, almost like, it's someone who annoyingly corrects grammar in like social situations where you're just like, this isn't really, you knew what I was saying. Like, Joe is doing that right now, but the guy didn't actually grammatically say anything wrong. It's just like, you're insane the way that you word everything, and you're so purposeful behind it. But I do love what Joe's saying here, because I do think when we talk a lot about the Jason Tatum critics and critiques that he gets, like, he's totally right. It's a blessing, because the reason he gets those critiques is because he's a superstar, because he's a guy that's worked his life to be one of the best players in the world. There's 450 players in the NBA. Those are the best 450, or, you know, there's probably a couple of Europe guys that top 500 players in the world, and he's top 5. He's top 5, right? What else can you say? Top 5. And so, like, I totally get what Joe is saying by that, like, while a lot of people look at it like, man, doesn't it just suck that everyone wants to drag you down, say you can't do this, say you can't do that? It's like, no, dude, that's fucking amazing. That means they're saying that because they think that you're in this area, and you have earned the right to be in that area, to be thought of that way. So I actually really love what Joe's saying, and his delivery, again, is just always going to be hilarious.
He's so funny. Joe Mazzulla is so funny. Yeah, I know you haven't watched the whole thing yet, but there are a few other clips. I won't spoil everything for people that still want to watch it, but I think it's worth it for like the clips of Joe Mazzulla talking to Jason Tatum on the court, because there's like it's really good insight into the way Joe communicates with his players. So I won't spoil that, but I actually found it worthwhile. Like, I've seen a lot of Celtics content. I'm a diehard Celtics fan, and I hadn't seen these clips before. And for those of you that wonder, like, what does a conversation between a coach and a player sound like? Talking X's and O's, but talking intentionality within those X's and O's and the intricacies of those X's and O's. It's really, really enlightening. And I was impressed with the way that Jason Tatum, how coachable he actually is, and how Joe Mazzulla just doesn't have any fear about the way that he communicates with his players. He's going to coach everybody the same way. And it just gave me a lot more hope for the next 15, 20 years. Like our guy Mike Gorman said when he was on the show here, he said Joe Mazzulla is the guy for the next 20 years with the Celtics, and you can see why just with the little clips you're seeing, and the more authentic Joe Mazzulla is able to be in year 3 as a Celtics head coach.
In that type of relationship you're dealing with, I feel like those were part of the pillars of the Belichick Brady Patriots, is that he would coach. Like Brady he would coach Brady, and Brady would allow Belichick to coach him. And same thing with Popovich and Duncan. I feel like you've heard similar stories about those relationships, and that being a big part about it is that it's not a separate superstar and coach relationship. It's a coachability that goes kind of both ways. Last thing I'll say before we wrap up here. Watching those first couple episodes, man, I think maybe the highlight was the KG Arvydas Sabonis impression.
Oh,
dude, I was howling at his impression. So
ask
KG
about me. Yeah, Pat doing about me, best in the world.
And I don't know what accent he's doing. I don't even know what a stereotypical Lithuanian accent would be. But whatever evil European, accent KG was doing while imitating smoking a cigarette. So for those of you who haven't watched, Domantas Sabonis is part of it, and they start talking about his legacy with his dad, and how he grew up in Portland, and not really knowing about how good his dad was until he was older. And so they had KG who was there, I think primarily mostly talking about Tatum and other stuff, but they asked him about Arvydas, and he tells this amazing story about how Arvydas was, I think, a 31-year-old rookie by the time he came over from Lithuania to play with the Blazers. And so it was the same time that KG was in the rookie sophomore game. And he talks about just Arvydas. He's like, man, it's the first time I've ever seen a dude just light up a cigarette, sit in the corner, and just talk trash. He's a rookie, he's an old rookie, but everyone's talked about the legend of Arvydas, and he's just, like you said, David Robinson, I'm better than him. Ask him. Patrick Ewing. And KG just gives an incredible impression of it. Had me absolutely howling. I think one of the funniest clips I've seen in a while.
KG was great on that show. He actually talks, and they cut to him a lot on this show.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah, he talks about Jimmy Butler. I don't think he comments on LeBron much. Maybe he comments on Bronny and LeBron at one point, because there's an episode that goes into Bronny's cardiac arrest and all that stuff, which Danielle didn't know. Like, for the casual fan, like it revealed a lot. Goes into Jimmy Butler. I don't know, you've probably seen this circulating, but Jimmy Butler's dad passed away last season, which is why, like, the Pat Riley stuff now, it's like doesn't look so great for Pat Riley, knowing that Jimmy Butler is dealing with the death of his father while Pat Riley's talking shit about him all season. So that was tough. But then Deuce Tatum, there's a lot of Deuce content there. It's a family friendly program, although there are a significant amount of curse words in it. And one thing that Danielle and I were talking about is Jason Tatum's house. So when you watch Jason Tatum's house, it's this like huge house. He's got his own playground. Like Deuce has his own playground there. And one thing I was thinking about was, like, Deuce Tatum is so famous. It must be hard for him just to have normal friends.
Even Tatum calls him the most famous guy in Boston. Like, that's
right.
Like Jason says that.
So like, is poor Deuce just like constantly playing by himself in this huge house in this like big private playground, or does he get to have friends that come over and like play at his house? Because, like,
I don't know, man.
It must be so tough to be Deuce Tatum, man.
Yeah, it's a really interesting life, and I feel like he's got a baby brother now. I think I know Tatum had another kid over the off season. It was like kind of hush hush. So I don't remember all the details. But
have you ever seen Tatum's Deuce's mom? Have you ever seen what she looks like? Ever seen a picture?
Only because I've Googled it before, but I don't remember her name. But
is she involved in the life? Like,
I don't know. I've gotten curious about that too. I couldn't really, through my internet sleuthing, kind of figure that out. But it's just like, Deuce is so prominently everywhere with Tatum and his mom, and like I'm like, so it's made me wonder that same thing. So I have no idea what the relationship
it must be weird,
or what it is. But yeah, I'm very interested to see, because Deuce has just had such an, like we talked about at the beginning with like LeBron, you can act like you're normal. Deuce is not having a normal childhood. Like it's probably a really cool childhood in some ways, but in other ways, I'm hoping he's having a little bit of a normal childhood as well. So, we're going to watch Deuce grow up right in front of our eyes, and we'll see what happens.
I know
it's going to be interesting.
I've talked about this before, but my high school coach, he runs a Step Ahead basketball based out of Newton, and that's Deuce's program, right? So Deuce is in his program. So I know that he's on like a normal team, so he doesn't go to like all private things like that. I used to coach for that program. So like, Deuce clearly is just there playing basketball with friends. I just wonder if his friends go to his house or if he just has this playground all by himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just him and his dad's friends.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Well, that's gonna do it for this episode here of Green with Envy. As always, we appreciate you guys for tuning in. You can catch the full video on this. We did a lot of breakdowns on this one, so I'd recommend going heading over to the YouTube channel to check that out and get the full visual. While you're there, make sure you give us a quick subscribe. Would love to see you guys more over on that page. But Greg, any final thoughts here before we send this out?
Just remember today at 4 Eastern, we're going to be live with Steve Cerruti of the Ryan Russillo podcast. So we'll be on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing to our YouTube channel. We'll be here on Twitter. So if you have any questions for Cerruti of the Ryan Russillo podcast, make sure that you bring them at 4 Eastern today.
All right. That's going to do it. We will catch you guys later. Peace.
Missed free throw. Ford for the rebound. Here's Pritchard. He loves these. Puts it up half court of the buzzer. Bang!
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door. I'm coming to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jason Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating the river. I call to see if you open, you know I hope you deliver. Every time you're getting close, I still be sick with the shivers. But there's nothing like that first time. I still remember the first time I saw you. You were looking so fine, chill like lo-fi, watch you go by. It was all I could do to say hi. I still remember the first time I saw you. You were looking so fine, chill like lo-fi,